Podcast Roundtable round 145. Welcome back. Obviously, if you're listening to this later, you didn't even know we were gone. 144 and 145 happened right close together, but it has been a while. In fact, we haven't been on here since here in the U.S. we're experiencing protests over police brutality and the killing of George Floyd. And to be honest with you, I just was not into talking about podcasting and microphones, as Dave put it, and that's so true. And you didn't need to hear my voice, so we are back. I'm super excited about it. I spent some of that time to help educate myself, as well as again, just give more space to the conversations around equality and justice. And I also spent some of that time looking around the podcasting space for Black voices in podcasting, because there are plenty, and I'm not connected to enough of them, and voices that we can amplify here on the roundtable. So I'm excited to return with rounds that will be more representative of podcasting, the podcasting space as a whole. And so if you are watching, if you're a podcaster of color, basically if you're not a white male dude and you have not been a guest on the roundtable, please reach out so we can change that as soon as possible. I try to be diverse on this, whether it's podcasting experience, right? If you've been podcasting for 1 week or 15 years, we try to spread that out. Gender, race, you name it. Geography, we do really well in international. I've been excited about that. The last year, we've been really making an effort to get more women podcasters. And last round, I put out the call out for more women podcasters, because the list that I choose from, we kind of ran out. And thank you for stepping up. Everyone did such a great job. So we have a good lineup of female podcasters to bring on here, so that's exciting as well. So again, the list needs your help. So almost certainly it's due in part again to having 3 white male podcast hosts. So that's where you help me balance out the roundtable. It's something I should have been asking for more from the beginning instead of just pulling from that list. So I'm asking now, and please reach out. Podcastersroundtable.com/guest is where you can sign up, and then we will get you on. But let's get to that roundtable. Let's meet the roundtablers. Co-host Dave Jackson, welcome back.
Yes, I will echo. If you don't look like me, please, podcastersroundtable.com/guest. Yeah, I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, where I help you start your podcast and grow your influence.
Dave, with that beard, that new beard you're rocking, nobody looks like you.
No, and here's the thing that kills me about my hair right now, especially with this lighting. The one thing that's not turning gray is a spot under my nose. So I have like a built-in Hitler mustache, and I really do not want to have a Hitler mustache. It's not good.
When you dye your hair, you want to go the other way. Okay,
yeah.
Just go with a little bit of gray in here.
So I got to go find some gray to get this one last spot that just doesn't want to leave.
Just go all red or something. Go
purple.
Purple. Go be crazy for it. I mean, it's a midlife crisis. Go for it. All right. Well, hey, first time roundtabler Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. It's good to be here. I appreciate you inviting me.
And what's your podcast?
My podcast is Grief to Growth. It's Grief the number 2 growth, and it's all about growing out of tragedy. So people that have gone through like the greatest tragedies of life, particularly a loss of a loved one, how we can take that and actually grow from that experience.
Very cool. Very cool. And then also first time roundtabler, DJ Fusion. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you, everybody. My name is Mary Nichols, aka DJ Fusion of the Fusebox Radio broadcast. I started my show as an outlet when I was in college to have both expression in terms of news and commentary from our slice of the Black American experience, as well as playing all types of old and new school music, hip hop, soul, funk, jazz, reggae, and more. And a few years after I started the show, podcasting happened, and one has basically been doing that since for about the past now 13 years, I think will be this year. So really glad to be on board.
That's awesome. And you know what? You've been on the list way too long. So I was super happy to get you on here. I think you signed up a long time ago. And that is the only that's the only problem with the list is it with 2 or 1 guest every 2 weeks. It takes a long time to get through the list. So if you've been on the list a long time, hang in there. I still have it. I still pull from way back. So definitely hang in there. And then Mary, you have a music show. Maybe we'll dig into this later. Remind me to dig into, because your show is mostly music, right? And so I'm curious how that works, and like if you have any pushback with playing music. So especially if you've dipped into like Spotify and stuff. Anyways, it just reminded me as you were explaining it. We'll go there and talk about it after we get through our articles here. Just remind me. Let's see if we can remember. See if I can remember. But let's jump right in. I shouldn't say that. I hate saying that. People always say jump right in after like 5 minutes of talking. If I was jumping right in, I would have did that already. Come on, Ray, get with it. Mary, you have an article here. This Uncomfortable Conversations one. Why don't you tell us what that one is about?
Sure. This was an article I saw from Ad Age over the past week or so called Uncomfortable Conversation. Black podcasters need brands to invest in them long term. For me, I found it interesting because I've always felt that there's been a vibrant Black podcasting community. And it always feels bizarre that it had to take tragedy or something dramatic for people to be there like, oh, there's these Black people and they do podcasts too. And it's like how any other media form would be. Everybody does stuff from serious to silly and everything in between. And one of the things with the growth of podcasting in general, much less people recognizing that Black podcasters do have very dedicated audiences, whether they're medium-sized to big, is that like in other forms of media, we usually tend to get the short end of the stick in regards to budgeting, promotion, and so forth from our own sources and from some outside sources. So this particular article was just talking from the perspective of an individual who actually does try to get these types of podcasts advertising money and some of the struggles they have gone about with doing it, and with everything that's happening right now post, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and unfortunately what feels like an ever expanding list. Just seeing how some of these various funders from companies, advertisers, and so forth are looking to not just support these particular outlets in the short run, but in the long run, and trying to make things just more fair and equitable in this particular form of independent media.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble with the camera there. I'm trying to juggle here. Yeah, there was a line in here that I thought was cool, and it was talking about investing for the long term, but it said now is the moment to make investments in Black podcasts part of your evergreen strategy. While one-off investments are nice, they don't actually build the relationship and trust that makes both parties desire. I think I read that wrong, but amplify their content. Platforms where podcasts are found can adjust their algorithms or create playlists of Black podcasts to make them more visible to the masses. And I think, that's, the important thing too. It's like, you see a lot of people are going to be, they're going to jump into the time. They're going to say they did one thing, or they're going to put a black square on their Instagram feed, which I had too. And then that's it, right? Not here anymore. Right. And this article is talking about more of the long term. And I think that, we talk about discovery a lot on here. So, and Apple, right, front page, they make lists, they curate these big networks and stuff. So I would like to see, those big platforms like Apple and Spotify do something like that for the long term, right? Feature, all kinds of podcasts that aren't just backed by big money. And, Dave, I don't know how these, sort of featured things are put onto, Apple Podcasts and stuff, but I'm sure it's based a lot on influence and money and who and, the sort of East Coast bubble we talk about, being connected, right? But this is a real chance for them to not to just do one thing where they feature a few Black podcasts for the week or something, but it should be a recurring thing. I like this, like, we talk about algorithms, we don't know what goes into it, and they're saying here podcasts are can adjust the algorithms to surface more of this content, right?
Yeah, I know. I logged into HBO Now for the first time in a while, and they have a whole section now of just different, here are some things you need. Here's the 13th, here's this, here's all these different movies that if you look like me, you need to go watch, because you will get a whole different set of education that is not on the Wikipedia page. I will say that. And so it is going to be interesting to see how, because again, there are more colors in the rainbow. So why, like, it's great now that this is happening, but we also have to figure out, like, all right, well, what about the Asian people? What about, that's a whole other topic. But I also want to think long term, like, I don't want to go back to just a bunch of white people on the front. That's just not the way it needs to be. It doesn't, like you said, Ray, it doesn't reflect the real world. So I'll be interested to see as we move forward. I'm with you. I don't want to just see a Band-Aid here and then, like, okay, well, yeah, it's enough of that. Let's go back to where it was. That's not, I hope the new normal looks a whole lot different than the old normal.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I've been talking
definitely.
I've been talking about Black issues pretty actively for the last many years on Facebook. I've got a pretty decent following on Facebook, and frankly, nobody cares. People just kind of scroll. There's Brian going on about Black issues again. There's another guy who was killed by a cop. But I've realized in the last couple of months, now suddenly I've got people's attention, and people are listening, and people are interested. So actually, I'm giving a forum on race tomorrow. I've signed up some people to take a little crash course on race in America. So I think this is an opportunity. It'll be really interesting to see how sustainable it is. And actually, just this morning, my podcast is not really necessarily from a Black perspective. It's really more from a more spiritual perspective. But as a Black man, I've got a story to tell. And now that people are interested, maybe I can get that out. So I'm curious about maybe starting a podcast to talk about that from America, from a Black perspective, and see if people are interested.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Do it. Start another podcast. How many do you have? One podcast? This is what happens, right? Start one, you end up with
I have one right now, which is way overwhelming, but I'm seriously thinking about doing it. Just something real quick where I could just do, short like monologues. Because like I said, people now for the first time since I can remember are actually interested in hearing, what's going on with the Black community. And they're starting, I think videos made a big difference. People are starting to believe our stories, that this has been our experience. And people are, they're just, I'm going in and I'm just educating people every day about our history, because people don't know about, and I mean American history, things that people are just shocked by. And so I see a real awakening. So I think this could be an opportunity that people will start to listen to some of our stories.
Evo Terra turned me on to a podcast, and they did, I don't know if that's the name of the show but it was called Seeing White. And it was, again, just history that I never heard. And I think the one that really, I was just like, wait, they did what? Was Pocahontas had married some dude that was super rich and into tobacco, and in Virginia. And this is like in 1600. So this is not that long ago. And they said back then, if you wanted to be a citizen, they had a 1-drop rule, meaning if you weren't 100%, sorry, you can't be a citizen. And then this guy marries Pocahontas, and they're like, wait a minute. And their kids grew up to be rich and famous because dad had tons of cash. And they went, okay, well, the 1-drop rule applies to everyone except those guys right there. And I was like, wait, what? And nobody stood up and went, wait, that doesn't seem fair. And I was just like, that's the one. I'm like, that I've never, and then I go to I start researching. I'm like, oh yeah, it's out there. It wasn't taught to me. And then they showed they played a clip of a 3rd grade teacher, because there was a massive hanging in Minneapolis or in Minnesota somewhere. And again, you never hear about this. And they showed how the 3rd grade teacher was teaching this really washed down version of history of what didn't happen. Now, again, 3rd grade, I don't know. I'm like, why are we teaching 3rd graders? Well, I guess it's part of history. But it was just interesting to see how the 3rd grader was like, these Indians only knew one way to communicate, and that was through anger and trying to kill everybody. You're like, no, not really. Yeah. They had been screwed, blued, and tattooed for centuries, and they'd kind of just had enough. So it was just interesting to get a different perspective. And then you look into it and you're like, oh wow, this just was nothing I ever heard. So It's
I actually posted a Wikipedia article yesterday, a couple of days ago. This medical term called drapetomania. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but this guy actually said that slaves wanting to run away was a medical condition, and he actually presented a paper that said if you treat slaves this certain way, because black people they have this innate desire to be controlled, and as long as you treat them that way, that they'll be fine. But if not, they develop this thing called drapetomania, and they'll run away. And this is serious, and people are just like, they just can't believe this really happened. So, Dave, you made a really good point. There's so much stuff in our history that we don't know about, and I'm rewatching The Watchmen right now on HBO, which talks about the Tulsa riots, which is that's a euphemism as itself. It was a Tulsa massacre that nobody knew about until it was made in this fictional show. So it's really good that this stuff is starting to be uncovered and people are starting to understand our true history, which is a legacy that we all have inherited.
Brian, you mentioned that, cameras making a change, and I heard someone talking about that and how, we lost Mary, but how, things in the past that you would hear stories, and whether willful or just not wanting to deal with it, a white person could sort of turn it off or say, well, maybe they were bad or did something wrong. Right. But now we're just seeing it. It's there where you can see this person did absolutely nothing to deserve the treatment, and they received, and it's changing things. But it also makes me think that podcasting is equally powerful in that it gives the beauty of podcasting is that in theory, anyone can start a podcast, right? So it allows us to amplify voices and retell, right, history from the voices of either the people that were there or people who learned it differently than it was taught, right? Or have something else to expose that we weren't taught in school in a textbook. So, I think podcasting has a big part in that. And that's, why I want to see more people start podcasts, because everyone's got something to share. And it is empowering if you can, especially gather a community. You said you're kind of getting a following around it, and think about starting another podcast, which I think you should, because that opportunity is there to express that now.
Well, podcasting is a great democratization because, as you just said, it doesn't, literally, if you have a phone, you can start a podcast. I mean, we like to talk about microphones and headphones and all the fancy stuff. But if you have a phone, you can start a podcast. And if you got something to say, you can find people that are willing to listen to it. So that's the great thing about this whole explosion of information, and nobody can shut you up. So you can get your voice out there, and people that are interested could follow you and hear you. And I encourage everybody to let your voice be heard, let your perspective be heard, because your voice is needed.
Yeah, one of the things that really sucked me into podcasting is when I started one. I'm going to say in less than a month, I got a piece of voicemail from a guy in Nuremberg, Germany, and I'm in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, and there's some guy on the other side of the planet, and not only did he find my show, but he liked it. And I remember I just kept hitting play on that, and he'd say, "Hello, this is Michael Van Loor," and I'm like, did he say Germany? My brother's like, yeah, I think he did. I'm like, hit play again. Mm-hmm. So that's when I knew. I was like, oh, this is okay. I'm going to plant my flag right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brian as a fan.
I would say, I know for me,
well, what's up, Chris? Go ahead, DJ.
I would say, I know from.
Oh,
it's going to be one of those days.
It wasn't me. We lost her. All right. We'll hold that spot.
All right.
Jump back in. Having some connection issues. The thing is, on Google Hangouts, we used to be able to downgrade the quality. And I don't know that you can do that. I mean, you could shut off your camera.
You could do that. You can go into your camera settings and tell it to be.
That's right. The cam mic. You can bring that down.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
General.
Yeah.
Camera. I don't see. Oh, the resolution. Okay. How do we do that? Mary back.
She's back.
It's downgrading for her though. I think there's a big delay too. Mary, go ahead. We got you.
Got a bit of a break.
Yeah, this is super.
Yeah.
That's the other problem I found. We're using StreamYard if it's in the audio only, is when there becomes a delay. It's bad. All right. Well, hey, we're going to move on to Brian. Why don't you give us one of your articles? We got the Million podcast here, which we'll talk a little bit about.
Yeah, this kind of goes to what I was talking about, the democratization of podcasting, because Apple, I guess, just recently crossed 1 million podcasts in their directory, which is, I guess, a good and a bad thing. If you're a podcaster and you're trying to break in and build an audience, you got a lot of people you're competing against. And as I was saying earlier, you can literally, anybody with a phone can start a podcast. So as people that are trying to put out quality content, we've got to figure out how do we differentiate ourselves. But if you're putting out quality content, hopefully you'll be able to draw an audience. But it's great that so many people are getting their voices out there and being able to bring different perspectives, and people can find them, and you can choose who you want to listen to. So I look at that as a kind of a double-edged sword. As someone who's been in podcasting for about a year now and starting to get a little bit of traction, we've got a lot of people jumping into the pool. But as long as we're putting out quality content, I think we'll be okay. But it's really great to see the fact that we can all be heard, that we can all get our voices out there into the world and let people choose what they want.
Well, Brian said the magic word though: valuable content. And there are a lot of people that start podcasts, and I was like the other night I called my friend who I've known since I was in 6th grade. And we talk like it's 1983. We talk about guitar players. We talk about music. It's the same conversation. We're just older, and that is a great conversation, and it's real. But that wouldn't make a very good podcast.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of inside jokes that nobody would get, and I think a lot of people think podcasting equals conversation, and you want it to be a conversation. You don't want, if you're doing an interview show, you don't want it to be an interrogation. But on the other hand, just because it takes a little work to put out a like you said, to deliver value.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff out there. I'm in a podcast forum, and some people they'll post their podcasts. I'm like, do you expect people to listen to this? Because people just don't want to listen to you ramble on about your toenails or something. But there are people just like, hey, I can do a podcast. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be some shakeout. But the thing is, it's great that everybody gets a shot.
Everybody gets a shot. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. It's always a double-edged sword of technology, right? It's good that everybody has access, but at the same time, everything's not going to be great. Like, I remember first starting off, I'm just here, like, I never knew what an RSS feed was until I had to do podcasting. Now, the fact that people can pick up a cell phone and put their thoughts and stuff out there, I think is definitely cool. But sometimes you're just there like, these thoughts, even if they're on point, you still got to be able to put this together in a certain way, or have some thought in terms of who you want to reach. Like, my niche audience might not be your niche audience, but you got to think about the niche audience that you want to reach out to and, evolve with things. I know definitely with me doing the show for so long, I've definitely had to evolve how I wanted to package the show in terms of like length, specials, etc. Because some people like a long form, free form show, which is like our actual classic format, which is like about 3 hours. Cause that's how I originally started it when I was doing midnight to 3 a.m. show at Rutgers University Radio. Some people want to get, their hour in and that's it, because the original show was like, we'll talk this like 2 hours of music. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes people can sit in the office and be like, I got something to listen to for a nice chunk of my day before lunch. Sometimes people just want to have that get up and go. And a lot of that, I think, with podcasting is that people really got to recognize what they want to do and also not feel like they're stuck in terms of a particular format or whatever else. Maybe they do a show for a while and they want to move on to something else. And, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think we're in that interesting period of podcasting where it's so weird that people are like, podcasting is like remotely semi-cool. When I remember doing podcasting, it was just there like, what the hell is that? Like, I'll semi-age myself. You have some folks like, MP3 player. What is this type of thing? Like when iPods were first hot. Now everybody can like get an app, pull something up from like, my oldest relative to my youngest ones and see what people are doing and what's going on. You're starting to see articles about podcasters and, mainstream venues and so forth. And now you got people who just, they're like, I'm going to be famous like that person, but they don't look at the aspect of, 99.9% of the time they had to build up from episode 1 to the present to get to the place they are at right now. You know, like the fact that we have access is cool. I just think people gotta still respect the actual craft of podcasting and who they want to reach out to, you know, make things good. Because ultimately what you have and who you're reaching out to, they're the ones who are going to go ahead and help you stand out from the crowd. Like, you're going to be a part of what you do with the content that you put out, but ultimately you got to respect the audience that you want to reach out to.
Did the article that, and Dave threw it in the chat, we'll have it in the show notes, but the article that Brian linked to was a Mashable article, and it's basically an article about Daniel. So we're missing one of our co-hosts, but it's all Daniel, because they're taking the numbers from Daniel's My Podcast Review. So that was cool. So we got a roundtable representation in this article.
Yeah.
But that's Daniel's. Those are Daniel's metrics. He was watching that as it was about to cross the line. And Mashable, I think, put in here that Daniel released the number like the day before Apple announced it. So what is that called in journalism when you
scoop?
You scooped them. There you go.
Yeah.
Trivia. It's trivia night here. So that was really cool. But yeah, you know, and what we think that the number of active podcasts is something like 400,000 or something like that, right, Dave? And active is, I think Daniel defines it as release an episode in the last, what is it, 90 days?
I think it's 90 days.
Yeah.
And as I click on the industry stats, according to Daniel, wow, 3,000 were added yesterday. 3,600.
What is going on? What do you guys think is going on? Because
COVID, man. People are bored. COVID.
Is it COVID? Is it pandemic? Are people really starting podcasts because they're stuck inside?
Yeah, they're stuck inside. It's like I might as well do a podcast.
Yeah, he said
we're going to see a lot of dead podcasts.
Some people make sourdough bread. Some people make podcasts.
Yeah,
you know?
What happened with the sourdough bread?
Yeah, yeah. According
Which
to
I still don't understand the sourdough bread thing, but
yeah, I don't know that either.
Yeah, according to Daniel over at mypodcastreviews.com, 622,000 are active.
620. That's more than I thought.
Yeah,
it's more than I would have thought.
But that's, you got to remember, we just had record growth in May and June. So it'll be interesting to see once 90 days goes from May, how many of those May shows are still making shows.
Right. And I think
episodes.
The majority of these aren't the majority coming from Anchor. So we talked, Brian, you mentioned that it's easy to make a podcast on a phone, and Anchor does enable this. It makes it super simple if you want to try it. And I'm all for that, but we also see a massive majority of podcasts started on Anchor, I believe, are just abandoned after like 1 or 2 episodes.
I started on Anchor. Yeah. I did,
but you survived. You came out.
I did 6 months on Anchor. But yeah, and the thing is, so many people get into it because it's just like, let me just try this. And they as DJ was saying, they're not thinking about their audience. They're entertaining themselves.
Right. Themselves, yeah.
And that's only going to last for so long. And then they're looking. They come to the podcast forums. I'm on Buzzsprout now. I'm in the Buzzsprout forum, and people are like, "Why is no one listening to my show?" It's because your show sucks, man. Sorry, nobody wants to listen to your show. So those people, they're going to go away.
That's it.
Yeah. It's hard. People find out how hard podcasting really is, because it's easy to do your first 2 episodes off the top of your head, right? And then you're like, now I need to actually, if you're even focusing the content at all, you find out it's real hard. I mean, we're at 145 here, and you know, this show, I was just telling my wife last night, this show brings me back. I mean, there's plenty of times where I'm like, I don't know if I want to podcast this week, but the response to this show, when people come on and they're like, thanks for having me on, this was something I've been wanting to do, that just changes everything. So the audience has to drive, you have to build that audience, because they will pull you through those times when you don't want to show up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is a hard fact. Like, there's definitely been times I'm just there, like, I'm not a famous DJ. I just am saying what I literally want to say with my partner or whatever else. But then you'll get like various contact from people who like the music mixes you do, and people who like what you're talking about, even if they necessarily disagree with your opinion, or just they're like, well, thank you for talking about it. I saw a different viewpoint than what I was thinking about. And maintaining this throughout all of this time, like, those things do definitely help out a lot. You just, they're like, this is worth me engaging in and doing, besides just, talking into the void and being there like, here's some tunes I like, on top of just, saying, what I feel like literally the longest period of time I haven't done this show was over the past few months, when I ended up being in a car accident and breaking my leg.
Mm.
And even part of that was just like going to my email people to tell like, where's the new episode? You know, and I did an update saying, you know, what happened or whatever. They're like, oh, you know, oh my God, I hope you're okay. You know, just take your time and do what you need to do. It's like, they're like, dang, people
It'd
do
be much
care. Like, we
worse
live
if
in a kind of a crazy world sometimes, and doing this is kind of crazy too. So having people care is dope, you know?
well, it puts a lot of gas in your tank is what I always call that one. So anytime I get an email from somebody or I meet somebody and they're like, you know, hey, because of your podcast, I'm actually now podcasting or whatever. And I did a show once and I'd kind of lost I just didn't want to do it anymore. I'd been doing it for 10 years. It was for musicians. And I think it showed. And when I quit, I didn't get anybody that said, hey, where's the next episode? They could just tell I was bored. The content was kind of like, this'll do, you know, kind of stuff. And so consequently, the engagement wasn't there like when I first started it. And so it's great to hear that, you know, you got your audience out there going, hey, where's the next one?
Yeah, I think it's one of the keys though. You got to keep your audience engaged. And if you're just talking out into the void and you're just talking to hear yourself talk, people are eventually going to just go away. So, the thing is, I do my podcast both through Budsprout, but I also put it on YouTube. And I get a lot more interaction on YouTube. I get a lot of comments on YouTube. And I really wish I get more comments on the podcast itself. But those things kind of keep me going is when people say, hey, this is a great episode. I really enjoyed this guest, you know, that type of thing. And then, you know, the emails and stuff like that keeps me going and also helps you tailor your podcast to your audience. Because it's really out about the audience. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Right. Yeah. You go in thinking, well, I mean, you go in saying what you want to say and also thinking what, you know, the audience might want to hear. But at some point you do need to say, what do you want to hear? You know, I want to ask people, why do you listen to this? Like, which parts of this do you actually, that makes you come back? And, you know, if you build that way and you grow as you go, if you do that, you'll get more people because, you know, it's like the teacher would always say, ask the question because someone else has the question. Well, someone else listens for that same reason. It's probably why you're gathering an audience. It's probably something common that you're doing that you either do more of, or there's probably things you shouldn't be doing at all. We have examples of that as well, where people, you know, I always tell the infamous story that I thought I heard on Dave's podcast, but he doesn't remember, but it was a woman who did like a crocheting podcast, but then also did book reviews in the same one. And then people started telling her, I'm really not into the book reviews, just do the crochet. And then it took off or something like that. It's something like that.
Heather Ordover, Craftlit.
Okay.
Is the name
now
of the
you
podcast.
Remember the story. I'm so confused.
Well, Rob Walsh, I think it was in the last episode of the feed, did a study where he showed, because some people are like, you have to launch with 15 episodes, or you got to launch with 10 or 5 or 3. And he's like, he looked at that and he said, it's actually, if you launch with like, you just need 1. He said, maybe 3 if you want. He goes, but the problem is people launch with like 10 and you get no feedback. So that's like 2.5 months worth of content if you're doing weekly. And he goes, so you don't really you don't get to implement any audience feedback into your show. And most of the time he says they're not asking for it because they haven't thought that far ahead. Right. And he said, so he's finding that shows that start off with, you know, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 episodes, but they're all, he goes, if you're going to record a bunch ahead of time, ask for feedback and make sure it's easy to get there. He goes, because he's finding that the shows that launch with a ton, either A, don't have as many downloads because you're not getting, if somebody says, hey, I hate that lightning round, would you please quit doing it? And you're like, well, I got 7 more episodes with a lightning round. I'll just hang in there. That's not going to work. So I thought that was an interesting little study that he put out.
Do we think with, you know, there's always this issue of, Brian, you alluded to this, that there are a million podcasts. You know, Apple does not remove podcasts. And so we've had people over the years, you know, you get more rank if you were in there first and you've been there longer, even if you stop producing episodes, right? Brian's show could be doing new episodes, but a show that's in his niche could be that quit like 7 years ago is still ranking above his.
Yeah.
Do you think, you know, where should that line be drawn? Do you think we need cleanup at some level in these? I mean, because someone could do one episode and it could be the most important episode ever, right? And that you still want people to find. So I think it's a really tough issue to like, how do you sort of clean up or reward people, or should we reward people who are still producing episodes? I don't know. We've never really solved that. And people argue it as some kind of like discovery problem. I don't know if that's necessarily the problem why you're not breaking through, but I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
You would almost need a tag, yet another Apple tag that says like I'm here or keep going, because the people that did the one episode and quit and put the phone down are not going to know that because they're still not in the space. They walked away. Because you can't just say people did, because there's, S-Town did 7 episodes. It was meant to be 7 episodes. They did 7 episodes. So you need some way to flag Apple to go, hey, I know I've only got 7 episodes, but keep this. It was meant that way. Where the people that just did 3 episodes and walked away and it's sitting there on a free service, they're not going to do that. And
but does it matter? I mean, but should we prioritize it like that at all? Because those 3 episodes someone walked away from might be something that changed someone's life. Like it shouldn't be buried just because you're not doing it. I don't know. I don't know how much of an issue this is. I mean, do you guys find when you go into search for podcasts, you're just wading through junk? And how do you qualify junk? Like it's junk to us, maybe at the time of searching, but it's not junk to someone else who needs to hear that message.
I think you get into a slippery slope when you get into things like that, not just due to like serialized podcasts and things, but exactly from what you said. Somebody might be there like, this might be an episode from 5 years ago, but they're talking about something that's really applies to you as a listener. You don't want to like have that in what might end up being an electronic graveyard because they just didn't record any more things afterwards. I mean, you might want to have maybe some tags saying that it's an older, episode or series, but pushing it away, especially the way things are going with the podcast space, with these bigger companies trying to, control certain levels of distribution and so forth, it could get really nasty, Well,
you brought up a good point. And Ray, I think I've heard you say this before. You know how Google has a thing where you can say show results from the last year.
Right.
That might be a cool little filter if they could put it in there.
I guess, but I mean that only applies if the content you're looking for is time-based and relevant. Right. I had a random thought. Well, I had a thought while we were just talking this, and I thought, well, wait a minute. What is the space that has already experienced this? Blogging, right? And how does Google deal with this? Would be very interesting. So I think, and I'm sure that these podcast apps like Apple and Spotify surface stuff that is like Google's going to surface stuff that people are actually responding to, right? They're searching, they're clicking, maybe they're sharing, commenting, whatever.
Right.
They have these signals that
for a while.
There's signals that say, and I don't know. We don't know enough about how podcasts are really found in Apple, I guess. And so, maybe they are doing, I also worry that then the most popular, the people with the money, like, we talked about, podcasts that aren't surfacing for whatever reason continue to stay unsurfaced, right? You become popular because you've paid to be there, or you have some big media conglomerate behind you or something. So I don't know. It's sort of a tough nut to crack.
It is a tough nut to crack because some content is timely. If you're doing a news program, that's timely, right? I don't want to find a news program from 5 years ago, but if it's something else that might be applicable, it can be applicable forever. And I know a lot of times I'm on Google and I'm searching for like how to do something, and the internet 5 years is forever. It's like, okay, this is how you did this in Audacity 5 years ago. That article is of no use to me at all anymore. So get rid of that one. But if it's something that's not as timely, then there's I don't know if there's a real good automated way to do that. So it's a tough situation, I guess, to kind of figure out.
Well, I'll be interested to see. I'm going to throw in my link. I'm going to just take us right over to my article, Ray. There's they just had the whatever it is WWDC with Apple,
right?
And they say in iOS 14 when it comes out, it's going to have a revamped podcast app. With curated suggestions, to where I just scratch my head and go, don't we kind of have that now? The whole, if you like this, you might like this. I'm like,
yeah.
So
I'll be curating that, but always who's curating?
Also, that's the big question. Like who the hell is curating? Like I hate seeing those lists. I'm like, okay, so who did this come from? What AI made this up? Like you legit don't know, and it's frustrating. It really grow on a certain level. No. And everybody's not going to have the cash or the access, but you all want to, get to your certain level of success. And the crazy thing is, of all of these distributors, like nobody really lets you know how you get on the list. You just one day, are lucky, and you might be there like, oh, it's there, And while that's a pleasant surprise, it doesn't necessarily help you in terms of how you're thinking about, growing for your audience and the content and so forth.
Yeah,
because I will look on, Apple Podcast, and back in the day. Get on new and noteworthy. Nobody I know knows how you get on new and noteworthy.
Dave knows.
No matter how long you've done podcasting or anything else. When you had a specialized list, nobody knows how.
And
if we're quiet, I can at least see the gap in editing.
Yeah.
So I can tighten it up in editing.
Yeah.
We lost you,
she's
Mary,
back.
but I
was on a good rant.
Yeah, you were going.
Well, I'll short it up. Essentially, it's like nobody knows how to even get to these points of who curates what or how things are curated. And we need to get, I think, to the root of that before even getting into, how can we get these, lists to be pertinent to not just your audience, but to others. Like, it's been a mystery for over a decade. And something to me is seriously wrong with that. Like, Dave is talking about, we're going to make a list for curation. Well, what does that matter if we don't know who curates it? At least some of the other outlets will say, okay, here are some people or groups who do it. But the biggest distributor, nobody knows nothing. That should be a serious problem, whether you're, a big mainstream outlet or the most indie of podcasters.
Yeah,
we're talking about.
They're going to try to learn your personal preferences
to
suggest new podcasts available on the platform, making it more customized for each user. So their goal is to figure out what you like and then give you more of that. But yeah, it's we'll see. I mean, that's what Google does in theory,
I've run a website for almost 20 years now, and the Google algorithm has always been a mystery to everybody that's ever tried to sell anything on the internet, because you want to get to that first page on Google, and it's a black box. It's a mystery, and there are people that do SEO, and then they try to get you to that first page. So it's always going to be, and money is always going to be an influence. I mean, it's just going to be an influence in this whole thing. So as podcasters, my friend and I that run these same businesses, it's like, put out great content. That's what we can do. We can put out great content and hope for the best and try to pull our own audiences in, because depending on an algorithm to find you is going to be difficult.
Yeah, and then there's always issues. I mean, this is talking about diversity and equality. Going back to that first article, this is a chance, I think, for bigger podcast directories like Apple to be more transparent. And, they certainly, if they're going to curate, and I think they did talk about having an element of human curation in there, which they've always had, they need to diversify those humans. They can't be two people who are featuring content, right? I mean, they should be very clear and sort of expose that process, especially if it's not something that is you can hack, right? If it is a person, you're not going to social engineer maybe, but it's not some bot that, and I get that that's part of the problem, is that when you let people know how things are done, there's always going to be people scamming the system to get it out front. But so hopefully, I think this time in history is a bit of a chance to do a little bit more with that power and to diversify and get more people exposed.
As we were watching this, I went over and fired it because I'm still on a PC. I fired up iTunes, our good friend iTunes. And, they have those big squares at the top. Jason Morantz, who's a famous musician, is on a podcast. Something I've never heard, Freedom to Be Seen, is celebrating 50 years. Then you can listen to the Apple keynote. So a little plug for themselves. Rob Lowe has launched a podcast. So there's another real famous person. Rick Rubin, famous record producer, has some sort of podcast. Then Into America, Everyday People and Politics, and then Listen and Reflect, Black Voices, Incredible Shows. But like a big chunk of those are like, here are famous people that you'll recognize. Click on that.
Exactly.
Always an assumption that famous equals a good podcast. Like, right.
Well, Christopher put in the chat, and I agree with him. Word of mouth is the best way to share podcasts and find new shows. And I think word of mouth carries the most power, and word of mouth is something that you can control. So what I do with my audience is like, please share my podcast, because if someone says listen to Brian's podcast, they're a lot more likely to, even if an algorithm comes up with it. So that's something that we can control. It's a slow build, right? It's not getting to the top of that algorithm, but when you're going up against Joe Rogan and Rob Lowe, we're not going to get on that front page anyway, because you made a real good point. They assume famous equals good. So Rob Lowe's got a podcast. So I'll go listen to Rob Lowe.
Right. And, and that does beg the question of how much does it matter? Right. And I don't think it for me at this point, especially it's less to do with how much does it matter? Oh, you're new, noteworthy, and that's not going to get you anywhere. But I still think it's an issue if the same types of shows or the same people with the same type of influence always make it to the front page, like whether it matters or not from a getting subscribers perspective, I think it does matter.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, let's move into another article. Mary, you have a second one here. Diversity in the digital newsroom. What's that about?
Yes. Was interesting to me just for the sake of that with everything. Basically, that particular article, I think, just dovetails into the entire conversation we've had in regard to
It doesn't like it's like the extra bandwidth
and
of
this article.
Let's see if I can do. No, I can't. Mary, for some reason, the internet is just saying.
Okay.
She's fine until she starts talking.
Like the net doesn't like me today.
It's the dual thing. Like it's the extra bits to send both the video and the audio. I don't know. Let me read. So you did put a breakdown here. Let me just say. Let's see. The main takeaway.
All right. Do y'all guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we got you.
Got you
Can you hear
now.
us?
And then she's gone.
Yeah.
She wrote the main takeaway here, because this is the nice thing about people. We drop in articles. If you haven't been here yet, you get to do a little main takeaway. And she said, podcasting to me is the latest media form with most of potential to change multiple levels of indie and mainstream media landscape in truly displaying a diversity of views from folks of different backgrounds, race, sex, class, etc. One of the main reasons the form has actually grown is because of the growth in true diversity in the arena, and more of it needs to come to not just maintain this form of new media, but to keep old media alive, even just competitive level, much less an altruistic one. So I don't know if any takeaways from that. I was hoping to get Mary's take on that, but I'm trying to digest.
I kind of, for me, it reminds me of what I said earlier, the democratization. I mean, the fact that there's it's always good and bad when you get something that has a low barrier of entry, because anybody can, we can all get into this and do this. And so we're seeing more diversity because we're not held back by financial constraints necessarily.
Right.
And we don't need to spend a lot of money to reach an audience. So we can all put our voices out there, and there's some meritocracy to it, right? If you put out a good quality podcast, nobody can hold you back. Nobody can hold you from building your audience. So there is some level of it being a level playing field.
Yeah, and that's the beauty too, right? Is we talk about Apple and all these directories about being found, but if they kicked you out or you didn't even exist there, you're still available, right? The beauty of RSS is that you're not locked into any of these, right? This is the difference between something like a YouTube, which is fantastic, but if they decide that your voice doesn't belong there, you just lose your connection to your audience, and you don't do that with RSS. And I think a lot of people don't understand that about RSS, and especially newer podcasters who are willing to give away stuff like ownership of that direct connection to their audience. It's important to keep screaming from the rooftop, I think, how important it is to maintain that sort of your own property, right? And don't give away access essentially to your audience, because if you lose it, it's gone, right? And sometimes there's different. Your email lists still work because you at least then have another communication channel with those people who listen to your podcast. always saying, hey, sign up, even if you don't ever use it. I build email lists that I don't use just in case I do need to reach out and get around a platform. It could be on Stitcher. No shade on Stitcher, just as an example.
Yeah.
And Stitcher, it doesn't work, or maybe it just breaks, right? So how do you reach that audience?
Well, the other thing I always remind people of, especially when you're first starting out, I always hear things like, well, I've only got, 42 downloads per episode. And my background's in teaching. And so I divide everything by 20. And I'm like, well, that's 2 classrooms of people.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things where, if somebody says, oh, I've only got 100, people listening to my episode, I'm like, that's 5 classrooms of people that could listen to AM, FM, satellite, Hulu, Netflix, HBO Now, whatever, and they're choosing to listen to you. If you get those people in a room, you're like, wow, there's a whole lot of people listening to this. So I always hate to hear the word only in front of numbers, because it's like, there's no spam in podcasting. If they don't want to listen to you, they just delete you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave, because I've noticed in the forums that I'm in that people are always comparing themselves to each other. It's like, well, how many downloads do you get? How many downloads are you getting? And the thing is, if you think about those people being in a room, if you could draw 300 people into a room to listen to you, you would consider that to be a pretty successful thing. And if you're putting your podcast out and if you're reaching 2 people that really are interested in listening to you and really getting your message, then you should consider yourself a success. You have to ask yourself, why am I in this? Am I in it to reach a lot of people? Am I in it to impact one person's life? Am I in it to make money? If you're in it to make money, there's a pretty good chance you're probably not going to make a lot of money in podcasting. But why are you in it? What are you trying to do with it? Is a question I think we need to ask before we even go into podcasting.
Well, Brian hit the 2 nails on the head. The first one we talked about at the beginning of the show was, who are we talking to? Who's your audience? And then the second one is, why are you doing this? And the hard part, right? Starting a podcast isn't hard. Starting a good podcast is hard. And it's where the who am I talking to and why am I doing this? Because if I'm a coach and I want them to sign up for my coaching services, okay, that's the goal. But here's who I'm talking to. What can I talk about that will hold my audience's attention, but slowly inch them towards hiring me as their coach? And that's the part that gets kind of tricky.
And with downloads, I look at it like this, because it's interesting being from the era where people just like, I don't know what a podcast is now. Everybody wants to be like the star podcaster. Most of us don't talk to 100 people in a year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe not even 50. So if you have somebody who's taking out their time to literally, type in their device of choice, I want to listen to this show and I'm used to getting it at this particular time or whatever, you're already a success. A lot of these mid-range podcasters who will like have their own events and stuff like that, it's usually going to be, those few hundred people, but a few hundred people isn't small change.
Right.
When the podcast, I, love and respect, and, I know those co-hosts, shout out to the folks of the Black Guy Who Tips, they filled up an arena with a few hundred people to do their live show. I think anybody would want that you got people who are traveling to see you do what you do at your house or your home studio or an outside studio. But that's because they got a dedicated audience. I mean, there were people who are traveling from outside of their particular home area of Charlotte, North Carolina to see their show. I've had people I know up around here in the DC metro area who've had various events, and like 50 to 100 people, like folks are bringing about. If you bring in those many people in a room, that's a full room. That's nothing to sneeze at or whatever at all. So like, if you get those numbers, and you might even just be starting a podcast, you need to celebrate by whatever means you celebrate, because that's great. That means you're doing something right. A niche audience is not a bad audience. I think sometimes people sleep on that aspect with podcasting. Like for me, I'm just there like, I'm just me, and somehow that's a niche. That's a blessing. In media.
But you just made a great point. If you think about it, I talk to my family, my friends, maybe the cashier at the grocery store, and in a year, I bet I don't talk to 100 people.
And Dave, how many of those people actually want to hear anything about your podcast? They don't. They don't.
Yeah.
So the place you get to go to is your podcast. And when 10 people say, I'm actually really interested, tell me more, or your significant other's like, maybe just go outside and talk to your microphone.
Exactly. Yeah.
I I had a client once. He contacted me, said, I want to start a show about comic books. And I'm like, all right, we can do that. And he goes, I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, not another show about comic books. He goes, but my wife has said you need to go find somebody else to talk about comic books with because I can't take anymore.
And you'll find it. That's the beauty, right?
Yeah.
And thinking of 1 million podcasts, I was telling my wife last night about that number and the fact that there is almost, this is part of the point of exposing more diversity of podcasts. I mean, just all the different types. There is a podcast for whatever you're into, right? Like whoever you are, whatever you like, almost certainly. That said, there's also plenty of room to start podcasts about. There's plenty of topics left over. There's plenty of room to jump into a topic that is already what you think is taken, right? I always encourage people to look in your niche. Hopefully you are sort of thinking of a niche, right? There is the we just start a podcast with friends to talk about whatever we like. That's fine. And I don't even think that person has expectations of that podcast. They just want to do it, which Brian alluded to the fact you're talking to sort of entertain yourself. It is for you, and that's awesome. But there's just, with 1 million podcasts out there, there's just something for everyone. And I don't know that we see enough of that. Patrick said here, he said he noticed recently Apple has had a large number of curated list of podcasts by voices of color. And that's kind of my point is it's great to get in now and start exposing that. But I hope we see that a year from now, right? And that's my interest here in building a more diverse list is that a year from now, we are still seeing more women, more people from all over the globe, races, genders, everything. On the round table. And so Brian, I think it's kind of like, we hope this keeps going, right? I hope the momentum is here. I hope a real shift is in place. But we'll know that through the actions of people who are taking action now. And I just hope it continues years from now.
What you just said reminds me of when you're investing, they said never try to time the market, right?
And,
so don't jump into this thing with people of color just because it's a hot thing right now. If it's something you're passionate about, if you've got a voice, if you've got something to say, then great. I actually have been wanting to do this for a long time, so it might be a good opportunity for me. But if you're not passionate about it, then don't do it. Your podcast should be about, first of all, your voice, because you have a unique voice, you have a unique point of view, and it should be about something you're passionate about. And if you've got those two things, then you'll find people that will follow you because they want to hear your voice and they want to hear your passion. But don't just try to ride the waves and say or vice versa. Oh, there's so many things out there on comic books. I'm not going to do it because nobody wants to hear about it. Because only you can do it the way that you do it. So go ahead and give it a shot. But you'll be you got to set your own level for success too. And we can't all be, Russell Brand and get the multi-million-dollar deal, or Joe Rogan. We're not all going to be that, but we can all get our little audience and get our niche and have our followings and have our voice be heard and make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And to dovetail off of what Brian said, I think that is the beauty of podcasting that I hope does not leave. Like, we're still at a very interesting point with this form of media where literally anybody can get into it. You really can't do that with newspaper, radio, et cetera anymore and just reach the amount of potential listeners.
Right.
Hearing what you're doing. Like, you still don't have to be stuck in terms of putting yourself into a box per se. Like, you may want to have certain formats or whatever, but you can still literally be you and have somebody listen. That's a very, very, very powerful thing. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to love each other and agree, but just to be able to do that is something I think that's going to truly be what maintains podcasting as a power in terms of present and future diversity of, thought, expression, etc., regardless of your background. Like right now, we're in a particularly interesting place because for me, I've always been there. Like there's tons of black podcasters. I'm like, I can, hit up about a few people on Facebook right now. But if some of these things are getting more people attention, then that's cool. It's not necessarily had to be race-based. I know black podcasters who talk about comic books, who talk about video gaming, who talk about spirituality, who just talk just to talk, movie reviews, all other types of things. And there's times to kill me because I'm like, they have great content, but for whatever reason, they're not getting the audiences, the potential audience, I should say, they should be getting, because it's not like they're not talking about things that other people aren't talking about. It's like, what is this barrier? Like, what is the podcast glass ceiling, as it were? I think that's a big thing that has to be looked at and addressed for the future, because right now we're still in a great place where we all haven't been consolidated yet, even though Lord knows these companies are slightly worrying me in terms of how they're trying to grab up people and do distribution. But when we look at all of this, we need to treasure being able to have a media outlet that can literally reach the world, and you can just be the individual that, you want to be.
Yeah.
And your peoples can be those individuals that, they want to be. Like, it's going to be great to know the technical stuff, but we have to maintain that. Otherwise, it's going to go by the way of all other forms of media have gotten to. If anybody really wants that, I mean, we're able to have a roundtable talking about podcasting. We're having a podcast about podcast. It always has been, but it's great to be able to have that, because besides some people I know who do podcasting, my mother knows I've done this show for over 20-something years. She don't care. Besides the fact she knows I enjoy it,
Yeah.
But being able to do this, you get to reach out to other people and see, what's going on.
Yeah. I started podcasting because I opened up Apple because I was looking for ways to get music that weren't Napster, AKA get me sued. And I saw a little podcast thing and I clicked because I was like, what is that? It's two dudes like in their, living room talking about nothing. It was terrible, which drove home the point. I'm on Apple. I'm in iTunes. And there's two dudes talking about something I would never listen to. Why are they on this platform?
Yeah.
So I had to figure out what was going on. And it turned out I was like, oh, anyone can do this and put it out there, and a global audience. Like, just blew me away, because even as a kid, I had dreams of being like a cartoonist or an artist. And what was the way to do that? You go knock on the door of Disney or a few newspapers and you say, here's my stuff. And they'd say, no, thank you, which I did. They said, no, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you go find another career. Like, there was not, now there's no door to knock on. You go through the door, you start a podcast, and then, like Brian, you mentioned a meritocracy. Like, is it good? Right. And it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter if it's good or not. It still gets to live out there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
it's like publishing now. I think this is a great age we're in, because I have a book. I wrote a book, and anybody can write a book, and anybody can put a book on Kindle on Amazon, and it costs you literally nothing to do it. So you can get your voice out there, and people can listen to it. So for me, I've always wondered. I've been blogging for years, so it was a natural thing for me to go from blogging to writing a book, and from writing a book to doing podcasting, and being able to reach more people. When I said I was doing a podcast, my mother said, "What's that?" I tried to explain it to her. She never did get it. So I said, "Well, Mom, it's on YouTube." And she goes, "Okay, I understand YouTube." So there's still people out there that don't know what a podcast is. So I do the video and the audio, but we can all do it. And it's, like I said, it could be about whatever you want it to be about. My podcast has nothing to do with me being a black man. I just happen to be a black man. But it's more about grief, and it's about spirituality. But now that there is some interest in hearing from a black voice, I might do that as well.
Yeah, that's the beauty, right? You can the startup cost is pretty minimal. It's time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you might find a hit, and it could be a timing thing.
And on a side note too, like, I think when we hear people like talk about certain kinds of discourse they don't necessarily hear through, I guess, mainstream media means, you're going to get all kinds of discourse via podcast. Like, you're going to get that long form, well, I believe in this, and well, so-and-so might believe in this. And y'all can go back and forth and have those in-depth discussions to see why somebody thinks a particular way. Or you can listen to somebody show and be there like, oh, you think this way. That doesn't mean you're going to agree on everything. But I personally feel that through podcasting, at least through my experience of doing interviews with all kinds of people, music industry, politics, and so forth, like, you're not getting the, 24-second soundbite screaming match, and then you go to commercial. Because if you're doing a podcast, it's already a passion project. So
Yeah.
you're getting into in-depth in terms of what y'all both want to get into. And I think that's a lovely thing that people need to engage in with podcasts as well, whether it's something light in terms of, I like this movie, no, I like this movie, y'all go back and forth, to things that are very, very deep in terms of, political thought, in terms of what's going on now with racial conversation and so forth. You can really get in depth in somebody's mind. And usually if you're going on a podcast, going on there just to, rant, rave, etc. You're trying to fully express yourself because you have that outlet to be able to do so. So that's another thing I think about podcasting as well. Like, you can get into all types of passion projects, including things that are like ultra serious that might not necessarily be great for like a 15-minute sound.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because so much stuff now is so
It's
short.
about why they feel the way they feel about stuff.
I
think can open up train of thought and dialogue.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because so much stuff now is tailored to TV, right? So we got a 12-minute segment, and you can't really get into any kind of in-depth. So I do my show is pretty much an interview format, and when I bring my guests on, I'm like, it could be as long or as short as it happens to go. My shortest show has been 35 minutes. That was an interview. My longest was an hour and a half, and we'll just go as long as it takes to cover the topic. So people that really want to dive deep with you, that have a attention span that's longer than 12 minutes, they might listen to your podcast, because we could really have some serious conversations.
And the beauty of that too is that you could, as the podcaster, as the person on the show, you could tighten it up, right? Like there's two schools of thought. There's the, I don't want to get rid of anything someone said and change the context, or maybe it's not even context, but that thing that they said that I might not feel is valuable to my show might be valuable to someone else. But, because these shows, they live in, we talk about, big media is going to be like a 2-minute thing, and you can't really get anywhere with it. Whereas a podcast, we can go as long as we want. But I think then there's the next level of yourself as a producer. Like, if you do want to be like tight and it's just pure nuggets and message, without maybe banter or something, you can record for an hour, and then it's your job to edit. So you can compete in a sort of that arena of like, give it to me now. Like, what's the answer? Right? Or you could go long form. You really do have the choice. Whereas, you go to give that message on a cable news outlet, you don't have that choice. They're going to tell you exactly what you said. And sometimes it's not what you said.
Well, that's a personal preference thing, I guess, because I've been interviewed before for newspapers or for media or for television or whatever. And it's like, you said all this great stuff, and most of it ends up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah,
so my particular podcast, I don't really edit. I tell people, I want people to feel like they're sitting in a room with us and we're having a conversation. So unless something drastically goes wrong, I want them to feel like they're sitting with us and we're just going back and forth.
Yeah. Sure.
And one of my favorite interviews ever was Russell Brand with Candace Owens. It was 2 hours long. So people are either passing around this video of Candace Owens right now, and I feel like I really know her now, because she and Russell Brand just went at it for 2 hours. And that's what I like.
Yeah. I mean, that's what this show is. It's I always talk about I got a beer here. It's a campfire conversation. But that's the style of the show. Right. And so people will subscribe because they like it. And some people won't subscribe. I have had other shows that are more to the point, I guess you could say, or more focused. And there you go. There's your other show, right? If you're trying to appease two audiences, if you're trying to clip stuff that is more, shareable, I guess, then you either have another show or you got a lot of edits or you let it go. I mean, you really just got to find your style, right? And then, like I say, be true to that, because that is also what's going to attract more people, right? If Brian, like, if your interviews are laid back and it's open and you talk for a long time, people generally, when they start a podcast, and I mean, start listening to a podcast, they're open. They're not ready to be out of there in 10 minutes. So, I think people worry too much about pleasing everyone when they should really just make the show that they want. Ask and listen to that audience, maybe integrate some of that feedback. Brian's audience might say, maybe you guys talk about that person's book up front and then how they got into writing at the end, and you flipped them. Like, there's ways to do it. When we're worrying about being or growing to max capacity, I guess, if you want to say that.
Yeah, and I think this is where you have to be true to yourself, because so many people get into this. They're like, "Well, what's the optimal
Right.
length for a podcast?
What day do I release? What
because
time?
so people
What
when
time?
they're commuting, the average commute is 23 minutes. So my podcast will be exactly 23 minutes long. And like I
They
said,
got to
my
drive
thing,
home too.
yeah, my thing is I want you to come back. You can always stop a podcast and start it over again, right? But I've had guests tell me stories that they've never told before, because we just have a conversation, and they just kind of get into it, and they forget I want them to forget they're in an interview. I want them to think, okay, I'm just sitting down having a conversation with this guy.
Yeah. And it can take a while to get there, right? Like the beginning stuff, it takes a while to warm up. So, if you are interested in making it tighter, cleaner, more to the point, I mean, you can edit it away, even segments that bring that stuff to the surface right up front.
Yeah.
Can I ask a real question that's uncomfortable? Since we're talking about uncomfortable conversations, here's and again, I've always say this. You cannot look. I am pasty white. I'm not just white. I'm pasty. Casper the Ghost looks at me and goes, "Damn, you're white."
Even white hair, white beard, the whole thing.
Everything is.
Lean in.
Except for right here.
Yeah. So, because I hear because I was sitting there thinking about this. I'm like, okay, I've had people of color, I've had women, but I have had a lot of just white dudes on my show. And I thought about this, and I'm like, okay, so if I went out and specifically looked for, let's find some people of color to get them on my show. Now I feel like I'm doing, and this is one of those things, I almost don't know what this phrase means, because again, pasty. I don't want to have somebody think they're the token. So I need educated on that phrase, and what's the difference of including more people without crossing the line? Is that just an attitude where somebody goes, "Oh, that guy will do. I don't even know who he is."
Dave, don't do it once. Right?
Well, that's it. So that's my question. Because my biggest worry, because I'm a middle-aged white dude, is if I say the wrong thing, I will get canceled. Like literally, they'd be like, that guy, get him out of here. And I'm like, so if you don't know what you're saying, you shut up. And so I'm like, well, let's have this conversation, because on one hand, I want to do better, but I don't want to be accused of this other thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Dave, because I've been having these conversations for a long time, and in particular last month or so. So I had a person come to my Facebook wall a couple of days ago, and she said, something like, why can't I say all lives matter? Or what about black on black crime? That's what it was. What about black on black crime? Which is, by the way, is a third rail right now. You do not want to bring that up. So I'll just tell you guys that in case you don't know. But
I would say that's a big deal.
So I said, I give you one chance. I will tell people I give you one chance, and I'll explain it to you. And we had a good conversation, but some of my friends on Facebook jumped all over, and she ended up blocking me. I hate the fact that people have to feel uncomfortable with trying to have an honest dialogue. So I can only give you permission from me. I will give you permission to say things and say the things that are uncomfortable, because I want to encourage that. The worst thing that we have going on right now is this fear of saying the wrong thing, so people don't say anything. That just shuts down the whole dialogue. So I will be your token guy. I don't care, because I want to be an ambassador. I want to reach across and help people to understand. And some feelings are going to get hurt. People are going to say the wrong things. They're, like I said, what about black on black crime? Some people don't realize that is another microaggression. It's another distraction. But some people truly don't know that. They don't understand, why can't I say all lives matter? So we need to educate people on stuff like that.
And I think it's, it'll show in your approach, like, to become, if you were to say something like that, and then Brian was to tell you why that is just not,
that's not right,
the right thing to say, and you got defensive about it and just wouldn't back down for, like, not being open to the conversation, like, or saying something wrong and then just not being willing to hear the person who's telling you why it's wrong. Like, I think people know you, Dave. Like, I don't think that's
I was at an event where Mary was talking, and I kind of brought up that same question of, like, I don't know what I don't know.
Wait, you were at an event where Mary was speaking?
I think she was at MapCon.
That's amazing.
I believe so. Yeah. Because when she came on, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know her.
That's amazing. I hope
and she did a talk, and I had a woman come up to me and say, "Honey, you can ask whatever you want." She goes, "Between you and me," she goes, "there are people with the same skin color that can't agree on what is and isn't all right to say." Yeah. She's like, but she goes, "But I can hear your heart." And she goes, "You're fine."
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So
someone asked me the other day about African American versus Black, and you're going to ask different people, and they're going to hear different things because people in the Black community can't agree whether it's African American or Black. And at one time we were Negroes, and then we were colored, and then we were Black, and now we're African American, and I think we're kind of going back to Black. So these things change, but as long as your heart is good and people realize your heart is good and you're trying, that's what really counts.
Yeah.
Yep.
I could definitely dovetail off of that. Like, you wanting to do things and make sure that
boy, every time she has the better the point, the better the chance.
I'm telling you, it's the combo. It's just too much. It's video. I gotta get her to shut out the video maybe, because it's just
maybe that's it.
The bandwidth's just not there. It's not there.
It's so close, but not quite.
We're getting burst of bandwidth, but
the thing that I'm really encouraged by is we're having these uncomfortable conversations right now. I think it's great. People. It's interesting because so many people are saying, "I'm in so much pain right now."
I'm being discriminated against by Verizon. What's going on?
I won't name names. Someone hey,
in all seriousness, Dave, with what you were saying,
and she
to learn through.
Not gonna get it. Hey Mary, if you hear me, and you probably don't because there's a big delay, shut off your video, and we might be able to get, just when you're talking, and then we'll bring it back. See if that works.
The thing I've found in my years of wisdom, he said, stroking his beard, is uncomfortable conversations are uncomfortable, but in almost all of my travels, on the other side of that conversation, things are better.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah. I had one once where James Crinland is a friend of mine, and we kind of both had a few little shots across the bow, and I said, "Hey, yeah," and I was kind of like, "Hey, can we get on Skype? Because this is not normal for us." And I just said, "Hey, I thought you said this and this," and he's like, "Oh no, that's not the case." And I'm like, "Well, you did do this," and he was like, "Yeah." He goes, "But you said that," and I'm like, "You know what? That was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. You're right." And it was uncomfortable. But we're kind of like at the end, we're like, all right, cool. We won't do this going forward. You do this, you do that, we'll be cool. And it was awkward for about 45 seconds, and then we're cool. So, and that's just a quick example.
We never learn anything talking about the things that we all agree on.
Right.
Yeah.
We learn by talking on the things that we disagree on.
Isn't that the problem, right? Like, we live in Facebook only shows us the stuff that affirms the beliefs we have.
Yeah.
It's like, we talk about algorithms and recommendation engines and stuff that show me what I like is a big problem. Facebook is a big offender of this. And
here's more chocolate cake.
The same garbage over and over again, right? And like you said, that's a great point. Like, progress is not made that way.
Well, that actually leads to the polarization that we're having right now, because it's driving people. Yeah. I'm already here, and it's driving me over here. Yeah. And the person's over here is driving them over there. So that's why I really try to, on my personal page, is try to encourage people to, and it doesn't always work. This woman blocked me. She came on my page, and it was 24 hours, and she made this comment, and I said, "This is why you shouldn't say that." And she said something else, and she blocked me. But that happens sometimes too. But we'll never make any progress as long as we can't get outside of our bubbles.
Yeah,
for sure.
She's back.
Yeah, I'm sitting here like, is Verizon going to hate me right now? Let's see if this works. Okay, it seems like it's stable for more than 5 seconds. Cool. Okay. I was just going to just dovetail with what Brian was saying earlier, Dave. I think if you're coming with the good and proper intent, most people understand that. Like, everybody's not going to understand everything and everybody's viewpoints and so forth. And with a show like, I would say, School of Podcasting, if you're bringing on people who are still about School of Podcasting, they just have different backgrounds, I think that's super helpful, And if nothing else, all podcasters, I think, know how to talk. So if y'all got some things to bring up, beforehand, during whatever, go on and do that, because it's going to be a good, respectful forum. Like, I think the big thing sometimes with the outside image of podcasting is, until relatively recently, it's been people thinking that gets mostly, middle-aged to older white guys. Let's be honest, Like, you'll see people, and it might be almost be there like, oh my God, in terms of the public, even though most of us who do things in other spheres know that other folks exist, but that hasn't really been the big media PR push. Putting on more people who are about what you're about, I think regardless of whatever type of podcasting you do, I think this helps everybody out at the end of the day, because everything that necessarily had to be diehard, racial, political, etc., it could just be, here's a person who people don't usually think is in this arena who is talking about this particular thing. And when you get into, the racial, political, etc., in the day, it's all going to be just about talking to other people like they're human beings. Now, some people might get sensitive depending on what you're talking about. I think that's inevitable, that's going to go down and happen. But actually engaging in the conversation, unfortunately, especially in this day and age where it seems like everybody just yells at each other, that's a big thing. To just engage in that, I think, is huge, because I know through my Facebook page, and I know fellow podcasters can definitely talk about me sometimes or whatever. I've had people, go off because I didn't go by a particular status quo, but sometimes that happens. I had people during the last election cycle get mad at me because I interviewed socialists, for example. I was just like, there had to be more than one viewpoint in terms of it's just Bernie Sanders and that's it. So I interviewed podcasters of color who were running at the time and whatnot. And that might have been some of the most vitriol I've ever gotten in doing podcasting for over 13 something years, doing broadcast for over 20 something years. And it kind of blew my mind to a degree. But I was also like, well, this is kind of good, because it wasn't like people were having crazy conversation. They were saying, F whatever you follow, here's just my story and my experience. But for those people who had the vitriol, you also had people that are like, I never knew about that before. I might not still agree with this particular thing, but I see why people got to a particular point. So even, I think the big thing is when we talk about diversity doesn't necessarily mean you're all going to love and agree with each other. It means engaging in showing that there are other voices in the first place. Like, you have a lot of people in this world who are just mad right now because they're used to thinking about things in a certain way, in a certain paradigm. They're not used to hearing other voices, much less voices now who just, they're like, no, we don't got to shut up. We got podcasting. We got the internet in general, like, you're going to hear us now, whether you like it or not. So to be able to have people who want to have those dialogues, I think it's only going to be a good, beneficial thing.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons Joe Rogan is he will have people on there. And I think I was like, I remember when people used to do this. He had Ted Nugent on because he wanted to learn about bow hunting. And then Joe brought up mushrooms and psychedelics, and Ted, who's been forever very anti-drug. So Joe explained how he thought mushrooms would help expand your mind and open up another level of consciousness, et cetera, et cetera. And Ted said, yeah, when I was started up, my band would go out and do drugs on break, and then they would come in and they couldn't play. And I decided I don't want to do any of that. And it was like total opposite. And they kind of talked to each other and went, okay, well, that's you do you, I'll do me. We're good. But at least they understood the deal was. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was a dialogue. I remember those. People used to actually just talk to each other. And it wasn't, oh, that's it. I'm going to, call your sponsors and blah, blah, blah. It was just
that's the other thing about being nervous. I mean, you've already done the thing. Like we put ourselves on the internet.
Yeah.
Okay. We just open up the world. Like Mary, you're talking about how the most vitriol that you've seen is in a recent episode. I mean, like, we take it, right? I mean, you hopefully you go in, hopefully you develop a tough skin, all right? Because the internet can be a beautiful and ugly place. And we all take the negative comment and we just dwell on it forever. And we get 20 great comments and they just like float, they just go right off of you. And you gotta flip that, right? It's that negative comment you can usually see it's nothing to do with you. Well, and Ray, hurting. Like
Ray, you do stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube's a dangerous place.
YouTube is, man, you want comments, start doing stuff on YouTube. You just realize that
but Brian's talking about you get the best engagement on. And I'll say I've been lucky on YouTube. I think it's just the niche I'm in, which is gear reviews. Like, how much hate people can throw hate at gear reviews too, but because what's happening? You have an opinion, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Everyone's got an opinion and we have a saying about that. But Brian, you were saying you get most engagement on YouTube, so it's working well for you.
I do. I'm small though, right?
Sure, but engagement, I mean, that's a hard thing to get, right? Just to get someone to say anything back.
Yeah, no, I am. I am getting engagement, and it's been really positive so far. For the vast majority of it so far has been really positive. And YouTube is a brutal place. I mean, you don't want to read the comments on YouTube, but I'm sure I'll draw my haters at some point.
I give everyone the power to delete comments. It's your channel, man.
Yeah.
You don't have to leave that stuff up. Like if it's constructive criticism, answer it. You know what? I've been having fun. So of course I do get weird, stupid comments sometimes. I'm having really fun by replying to them with sentences that make 0 sense. They make none sense. Like, thanks for that. I once went to my neighbor who had a tree with a roof on the deck who then ate slime mold, and I just leave it there. And they don't know what to do with it. It's just like, you didn't give them what they wanted, right?
Yeah.
They wanted,
Yeah.
right? But delete.
Now, see, that's I'm trolling.
Take the power. You have it. It's your show. Don't let that stuff control you, but be open. Hopefully people are open to constructive criticism that they get back. I think it's when you shut down and someone's telling you why that might not be right. You need to be open and not just instantly put up a wall.
The thing is, don't take the comments personally. First of all, they're just words. They're words someone typed into a computer screen. So that's the first thing you have to think about. I look at it as an opportunity to not maybe engage that person, but somebody that's listening to them.
Right.
So I was in sales for a very long time. So I learned how to handle objections, right? So to me, it's an objection. So I'm not going to maybe convince that person, but there's somebody else that probably holds that point of view that might read my response back to them and say, oh, okay, that's what it is. So I look at it as an opportunity. So I do engage the trolls to a certain point, and it depends on how. I mean, but you're right. I always have the power to delete. I will delete them if they're just totally nonsensical.
Yeah. There's a line there for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, look, nothing is wrong with a block button. Nothing is wrong with a delete. Right. You know, sometimes you just gotta use those things and engage. You know, it's like your house. You wouldn't want to have people coming in your house and dumping dirt around and kicking things and yelling and screaming at you. You're gonna be there like, you need to be out of here. So
exactly.
You can do the same on the internet too.
Yep.
Because disagreement is fine. When people are like rude and just tripping, that's why we have these tools.
Yep.
We can keep forth for the people who want to, check out what you're doing. Even if y'all aren't on the same page 1,000% of the time and actually want to engage in real dialogue. Because some of the things I think sometimes we got to recognize too on the internet is we have full control over this. We don't have to be there like, I got to, talk to every single one of you or do whatever. Like sometimes it's like, you got to be miserable on your own, Misery loves company and I ain't going to give you that company, I'm gonna still do what I'm doing because obviously I'm doing something that's of some interest because otherwise why are you tripping about what I'm doing?
That's it.
Yeah. Sometimes when you elicit a visceral reaction, you're probably doing something right.
That's it.
Yeah.
You made someone you really activate. Like I said, in podcasting, it's really hard to get people to engage. So we ask our people, hey, email us, call us. It's hard to get people to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Trying to get a review is like pulling teeth.
Yeah. Well, you can buy those, Brian.
Yeah.
I'm about to say, speaking of a whole other mystery, reviews have been the hardest thing. Like, it's like, I like your show. Cool. Can you give me one review? Hit the star, write something.
Yeah. It's too, why YouTube, Brian, part of the reason I think it works on YouTube for you is because that's a known, it's easy. I don't know. Yeah. It's right there. You comment, people are used to it. Yeah. With a podcast, how do you do it? Oh, I got to remember your email. Maybe I got to go to the show notes.
Yeah.
It's a large barrier to engagement. Right?
It is. Because the thing about a podcast, you're listening to it when you're in the car or your phone's in your pocket. But when you're on YouTube, you're looking at it.
Right.
So you're looking at the comments and everything while you're there. So that there's a reason why it's harder on a podcast.
I mean, imagine if I could say, double tap your phone to give me a like, and it goes to a like on, at that point, if you're using Apple Podcasts, double tap is a like or something, right? Like I've always wondered, where's the likes for podcasts? That's very low threshold and very easy to do. There are things that could be done to make it better. That's probably an entire roundtable that we could just keep going. But hey, I just want to say thanks. This was a lot of fun. Let's get on out. If you have any closing thoughts, go ahead and throw those out there. But otherwise, just let us know where we can find your podcast. And we'll put another one in the books. So, Brian, thanks again for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks very much. This has been a blast. My podcast is Grief to Growth. It's Grief, the number 2, Growth. It's on every major platform. You can find me there.
Do you have a copy of your book? Dave, I knew you just get a new book. Everyone should be holding up their book. I don't have one. There it is. There's looks
a copy
good.
of my book. Let's see. There we go. Get in front of the camera.
Grief to Growth. There it is.
It's available on Amazon.
Love it. Dave, didn't you Dave, thanks for joining us. Didn't you just release a book?
It's coming out August. It just got pushed back a month. It's called Profit from Your Podcast.
All right.
You can find it at profitfromyourpodcast.com if you want to do the pre-order. But my publisher, I got them on the phone. I'm like, hey, what's going on? They're like, COVID? And I'm like, oh, yeah. So like what was this big publishing company is now a little smaller publishing company. And they're like, yeah. So like the warehouse is a skeleton crew and blah, blah, blah. So it'll be an extra month, which is fine. Gives me a month to record the audiobook. Yay. But you can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com. Thanks for this is a cool episode. I enjoyed this. Awesome. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks, Dave. And Patrick says it's a great book, Grief to Growth. So you already got fans in the chat. Love
Thanks,
it.
Patrick.
Everyone in the chat gets a copy. No, I'm sorry. I don't have copies. All right, Mary, thank you so much for joining us.
So thank you so much for having me, especially considering all of the hate my broadband connection is apparently having
we did it.
on me right now.
Good now.
And but we did it. We came through. You can definitely check out what myself and my partner do with the Fusebox radio broadcast and all major podcast channels, FUSCBOXRADIO. FuseboxRadio.com is our official website. We also just launched a live DJ streaming site where we're using the Mixcloud Live platform so artists get their royalties and so forth while we're playing music live via video and all that. And that new website is called TheFutonDun, TheFutondun.com. And we're actually going to be doing a soft launch on that this Sunday in the afternoon. So if people want to go to that site, we'll give you the notifications to go forth and check that out. We'll be live streaming through Twitch and so forth. That's about an hour or two per week of all different types of really cool music. And then we'll be podcasting those episodes afterwards. So if you want to get an hour or two of some cool music in, you always got that. If you want to get the long form Fusebox radio show where we do a whole bunch of commentary on everything plus music, you can get that as well. So thank you for having me on the Podcasters Roundtable. I've been listening to quite some time. So seeing that email this week was just really like, wow, the Corona 20s aren't all bad. So thank you for that.
We'll make it through. All right. Well, if you want to be like Mary and Brian and join us, definitely podcastersroundtable.com/guest. Sign up. You might have to be real patient as a lot of people find out, but not always. So sign up. We'll get you on here. We'll have a great conversation like we had today. And thanks again, everyone. That's it. Wave goodbye. We're out.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Good seeing you guys.
Mary's waving. I
Alrighty.
promise.
I'm about to say.
She's waving.
I'll turn on my camera and wave now for a hot second before
it.
it freezes again. Okay, there we go.